There's a version of you right now that's comfortable, maybe even successful, but it's also the version that's keeping you from everything you say you want. And here's the truth. As long as that version of you stays alive, the version of you that was born to dominate, to thrive, to lead, will stay buried underneath fear, procrastination, and mediocrity. See, everybody wants transformation. Everybody wants to rise, but few are willing to face the most uncomfortable requirement of transformation: death. Not physical death, but the death of who you used to be. You can't step into your future still tied to your past. The reason some people stay stuck for decades isn't because they don't have the talent or even the opportunity. It's because they're loyal to an expired version of themselves. You're still trying to walk into a new season using the language, the habits, and the mindset of the old one. You're still negotiating with your excuses, still giving room to your fears, still justifying why you don't execute. That version of you has to die. Let's be honest, the old you is built on survival, but the new you is designed for significance. The old you focuses on playing not to lose, the new you plays to win. The old you cares about opinion, the new you is driven by purpose. You've been rehearsing the same story for years. I'm not ready. I don't have the money. I need more time. Kill that version of you today. Because if you don't, it'll kill your future tomorrow. You're not lazy. You're just loyal to a system of thinking that was never designed to make you wealthy. You're not scared. You've just been taught that caution equals wisdom, when sometimes caution is just fear with a good marketing plan. Here's the thing. Death precedes resurrection. What has to die is your addiction to comfort. What has to die is your attachment to validation. What has to die is your belief that average is acceptable. You don't become great by reading more books. You become great by becoming a different person, by building different habits, by accepting new standards, and by ruthlessly rejecting the excuses that the old version of you called reasonable. People will ask you, why are you changing? Let them ask. They're attached to who you were, not who you're becoming. And the person you're becoming doesn't owe the old crowd an explanation. There's a version of you that exists only because you've allowed it to. That version isn't the one designed for greatness, purpose, or wealth. It's the version formed by past traumas, reinforced by limiting beliefs, and protected by fear. That version is built for survival, not success. And as long as that version remains in control, the future you were created for will always be just out of reach. Most people live their entire lives protecting the old version of themselves. They defend their patterns, their procrastination, their fear-based thinking, as if it's their identity. They don't realize that what they call me is often just a collection of habits, thoughts, and narratives installed by other people, parents, teachers, culture, past pain. And here's the truth. Nothing changes until you confront the identity that's keeping you broke, stuck, and afraid. You can't negotiate with that version of yourself. You can't inspire it. You can't coach it into excellence. That version of you must die. The old you is the version that justifies laziness, that overthinks opportunities until they pass you by. The version that's scared to invest, scared to speak up, scared to step forward, scared to take risks, and constantly waiting for permission. That version of you is more comfortable with excuses than execution. It's more invested in comfort than calling. It's more focused on avoiding pain than pursuing purpose. And because of that, it builds routines around fear, builds relationships around mediocrity, and builds a life around surviving the day instead of conquering it. The point that I'm trying to make is that when I set out to talk with you, all the things we're going to talk about, they do exist in morality. That old you thinks being busy is being productive. It thinks talking about goals is the same as achieving them. It thinks reading a book is the same as taking action. It's a version that claps for other people winning, but never commits to becoming someone worth clapping for. Now there is a new version of you waiting to rise, but it's being suffocated by the one that refuses to let go. The new you has clarity. The new you moves in confidence. The new you acts even when afraid. The new you is disciplined when nobody's watching. The new you doesn't chase motivation, it builds systems. The new you doesn't wait for opportunity, it creates it. But that new version can't rise as long as you're still giving oxygen to the old one. Every time you make a decision from fear instead of faith, the old you survives another day. Every time you delay, distract, or downplay your potential, the old you lives longer. Every time you play small to protect someone else's ego or make others comfortable, you starve the future version of yourself that was created for expansion. There is no elevation without elimination. You don't just stumble into your next level. You must kill the behaviors, habits, mindsets, and associations that cannot go with you. You don't become a new person through affirmation alone. You become new through intentional destruction of what no longer aligns. You dismantle the old narratives. You destroy the toxic self-talk. You bury the version of you that believed wealth wasn't for you, that greatness was for others, that you were meant to just exist. Because resurrection only follows death. And the death required is the one you've been avoiding. The death of your excuses, the death of your laziness, the death of your indecision, the death of your attachment to being liked more than being impactful. You have to look in the mirror and decide that the version of you who keeps stopping, who keeps shrinking, who keeps starting over is no longer welcome. The future doesn't respond to intentions, it responds to identity. And as long as the old identity is still in the driver's seat, you will continue to live beneath your design. Most people want success without surrender, elevation without elimination, progress without pruning. But that's not how transformation works. You can't step into a new season carrying the weight of the last one. The old you, and the truth is, the old you is not just outdated, it's in direct opposition to the future that's calling you. The old you is the version that settles for almost ready, almost committed, almost consistent. And as long as you live in almost, you'll always be in the same place, watching other people rise while you rehearse why you haven't. Because every time you make a decision to stay where it's safe, you delay the growth that only discomfort can bring. The person you are today was shaped by patterns, most of which were designed to protect you, not to propel you. But protection becomes a prison when it stops you from progressing. The old you protects you from embarrassment by avoiding risk. It protects you from rejection by staying silent. It protects you from failure by not even trying. But while it protects your pride, it sabotages your purpose. The life you want is not hidden behind more motivation. It's hidden behind the wall of the identity that you're refusing to release. You can't be addicted to convenience and expect to live a life of conviction. You can't expect freedom while still defending your limitations. The mindset that got you here can't take you further. The thoughts, habits, beliefs, and language that shape the old you are outdated software trying to run a new mission. That's why your spirit feels stuck even when you're busy. That's why your mind is exhausted even when your calendar is full. Because you are outgrowing the version of you that keeps trying to survive instead of win. You were not created to repeat the same year over and over. You weren't designed to build a life around fear and call it being realistic. You weren't put here to shrink every time life stretches you, but the old you will always choose what's familiar over what's possible. That version of you would rather sit in dysfunction than step into uncertainty. It prefers predictable struggle over unpredictable success. Because success comes with responsibility. It comes with visibility. It comes with weight. And if your identity is still built around scarcity and fear, that weight will feel like a threat instead of an opportunity. The old you thinks not now is wisdom, but it's just hesitation in disguise. The old you makes you question your readiness instead of acting in faith. It convinces you that small steps are enough when you were called to take a leap. It surrounds itself with people who clap for comfort instead of challenge. The only way forward is through identity death, That means you must intentionally kill the thinking that got you here. You must eliminate the environments that enable your old habits. You must bury the excuses, bury the distractions, bury the self-sabotage. Stop waiting for perfect timing, for the right energy, for someone else's approval, because none of that is coming. What is coming is opportunity, but it will walk right past you if you're not the version of yourself ready to receive it. There are doors that won't even recognize you because they weren't made for the you that doubts, delays, and dilutes your gift. There are rooms you'll never enter if you keep speaking the language of fear. There are relationships, platforms, contracts, and legacies that will not connect with you until you've let go of the identity that was only built to get you out of survival, not into success. There's a law in nature that applies to success. Pruning always comes before fruit. You don't grow by adding more. You grow by cutting away what doesn't serve your purpose. That means if you're serious about transformation, about building a life of impact, influence, and income, you have to be willing to confront what's been slowing you down. And the truth is, what's slowing most people down is not external resistance. It's internal permission, the permission they keep giving to old patterns, to old fears, to old stories they've been rehearsing for years. The most dangerous thing about the old version of you is how comfortable it feels. It knows how to talk you into quitting, how to disguise fear as logic, how to call comfort peace. But what it really does is suffocate the new version of you that's ready to build, lead, and dominate. The version of you that's ready for more can't come alive until you put to rest the version of you that's okay with less. That means shifting your standards. You can't want high-level results with low-level routines. You can't want to be paid like a leader and think like a follower. The old you settles for good enough. The new you is committed to what's next. The old you is satisfied just knowing. The new you executes on what it knows. The difference between knowing and becoming is action. And action always exposes the parts of you that are still tied to the old mindset. Every time you delay, you're telling your old self it still has a vote. Every time you choose ease over excellence, the old you gets stronger. This is why change feels so difficult. It's not that you can't change, it's that you're still negotiating with who you used to be. People want transformation without tension, without pressure, without a break in comfort. But transformation requires tension. Just like a muscle must tear to grow, your mindset must be challenged to expand. The old you will resist that. It will beg for comfort, for routine, for predictability. It will crave validation from people who aren't growing. It will pull you back into old circles, old conversations, old rhythms. And if you're not intentional, you'll be doing the work but still holding on to the identity that cancels out your effort. Because your results are never just about what you do, they're a reflection of who you believe you are. That's why high-level strategy means nothing without high-level identity. You can copy someone's business plan, their routine, their blueprint, but if you're still thinking like the version of you that's scared to fail, scared to be seen, scared to be stretched, then all those strategies will collapse under the weight of your old programming. The old you sees pressure and pulls back. The new you sees pressure and steps forward. The old you waits to feel ready. The new you acts and builds readiness through action. And none of that happens by accident. It happens through decisions made in moments of tension. It happens when you decide that the vision you've been shown is more important than the version of you that's comfortable staying small. You weren't created to be a placeholder in life. You were created to build, to influence, to lead, to multiply. But that calling comes with cost. It comes with pruning. It comes with separation from who you've been. And if you keep trying to carry old habits into a new season, you'll sabotage the blessing you're asking for. So ask yourself what needs to be released. What conversations have expired? What habits have been tolerated for too long? What emotions have been allowed to run unchecked? What beliefs no longer align with your calling? Because if you don't kill it, it will kill your momentum. If you don't eliminate it, it will keep you circling the same mountain. And that cycle will become your ceiling unless you interrupt it with identity death and disciplined action. You can't build a new life with the same materials that built the old one. You can't construct a future on foundations cracked by fear, procrastination, insecurity, and emotional dependency. The problem isn't that you don't want more. The problem is that the current version of you isn't equipped to steward what you're asking for. There's a gap between what you're praying for and what you're prepared for. And that gap will never close until you confront the identity that's keeping you limited. Every breakthrough begins with breaking. Breaking patterns, breaking silence, breaking cycles, breaking comfort. That's why transformation feels like war, because it is. It's a war between the you that wants to stay safe and the you that was born to rise. The challenge is that most people protect what they should be burying. They protect habits that drain their discipline, relationships that choke their growth, thoughts that kill their clarity. The old you is addicted to survival. It knows how to function in dysfunction. It knows how to make mediocrity look noble. It wears busyness like a badge of honor. It knows how to make excuses sound intellectual and how to dress fear up as wisdom. That version of you doesn't need more motivation. It needs to be removed. Because you can't install abundance thinking on a poverty identity. You can't install confidence on a foundation of self-doubt. You can't install consistency on a blueprint of chaos. That's why most people never rise, not because they aren't capable, but because they never dismantle the version of themselves that's quietly sabotaging their potential. They keep changing behavior without ever challenging belief. They keep repeating tasks without transforming identity. So the results stay the same because the person doing the work hasn't changed. The truth is, the new you requires new agreements. You have to stop agreeing with your fears. You have to stop agreeing with small thinking. You have to stop agreeing with people who want you to stay in a version of life that's already expired. The new you doesn't negotiate with average. The new you doesn't explain elevation to people who refuse to grow. The new you doesn't keep old habits for emotional comfort. It doesn't shrink to fit into rooms you've already outgrown. It doesn't delay decisions out of fear of discomfort, because real success is rooted in identity, not activity. It's not about doing more. It's about becoming someone different. The kind of person who does what they said they would do long after the feeling of motivation has left. The kind of person who executes even when it's inconvenient. The kind of person who shows up prepared instead of praying for a miracle they aren't willing to work for. You don't need more time. You don't need a new planner. You don't need to watch another training video. You need to become someone who no longer tolerates the standards of the old life. Someone who kills procrastination by doing. Someone who starves distraction by creating. Someone who ignores opinion by focusing on mission. Because every time you let the old version of you make the decisions, you end up with recycled results. The old you avoids hard conversations. The new you embraces them because clarity creates progress. The old you keeps your gift hidden. The new you monetizes it, multiplies it, and uses it to impact others. The old you is stuck in emotional reasoning. The new you is rooted in disciplined action. And until you decide to completely burn the bridge back to who you used to be, you'll always leave the door cracked open for compromise. You weren't created for maintenance. You were created for momentum. But momentum is reserved for those who are willing to trade who they are for who they're becoming, not once, but daily. Not in theory, but in practice. Not when it's easy, but especially when it's uncomfortable. Because elevation is not an event. It's a lifestyle choice, reinfused by the refusal to be average another day. Change doesn't come when you feel ready. It comes when you decide that staying the same is no longer an option. Too many people are waiting for a moment, an opportunity, a breakthrough, when what they really need is a burial. They need to bury the identity that's keeping them stuck. Because as long as the old you is alive, the new you is trapped. The old you is the version that thinks starting over is failure, when in reality, starting over is the most courageous thing you can do when you've been building on a false foundation. The old you avoids mirrors because it's easier to stay distracted than to deal with the truth. It's the version of you that makes goals you don't follow through on, joins programs you don't finish, makes promises you don't keep, not because you're not capable, but because you haven't divorced the mindset that prefers comfort over transformation. There's a deception in repetition. If you do something long enough, even if it's unproductive, it starts to feel normal. It becomes familiar. That's what makes it so dangerous. You end up becoming loyal to dysfunction just because it's predictable. You justify bad habits because they've been part of your life for so long that living without them feels like betrayal. But until you betray the old identity, you'll never become the version of you that's capable of handling the next level. That version of you thinks differently, speaks differently, moves differently. That version doesn't need validation to act. That version doesn't wait for permission to start. That version doesn't keep asking, what if it doesn't work? It asks, what happens if I don't do this at all? Because the greatest threat to your future is not failure, it's passivity. It's waiting. It's hoping that growth will just happen without the internal death that precedes it. There's a reason why you keep circling the same mountain. It's not because you don't have access to the tools or the knowledge. It's because you keep returning to a version of you that isn't designed to climb. Every time you start to make progress, the old you whispers reminders of every past mistake. It brings up every time you quit before. It tells you to wait until you feel ready, until you're more confident, until the timing is perfect. But that's the language of delay. And delay always becomes denial if you don't confront the source. You have to realize that freedom is not a feeling, it's a decision. Discipline is not something you pray for, it's something you build. Confidence doesn't come from wishing, it comes from repeated execution. The old you doesn't understand this, which is why it will fight to keep you from becoming consistent. Because consistency exposes weakness. It reveals where your standards don't match your goals. It shows you where your identity hasn't caught up with your vision. The only way to shift this is to start treating your old identity like an enemy. You can't compromise with it. You can't reason with it. You can't entertain it when things get hard. It has to be eliminated. That means changing your habits, your language, your inner circle. It means creating a new standard that says, this is who I am now, not this is who I hope to become. Because identity is not created by what you say, it's created by what you do consistently. You have to be willing to disappoint the old version of you in order to develop the new one. You have to be willing to be misunderstood, underestimated, even isolated, because the process of becoming doesn't always look pretty. It often looks like leaving old conversations, walking away from shallow validation, and saying no to things that once made you feel seen, but no longer serve your calling. There's a reason why the vision in your heart feels too big for your current life. It's not meant to fit where you are now. It's meant to pull you forward. But it can't pull you anywhere if you're still anchored to an expired version of yourself. That version may have helped you survive one season, but it cannot take you into destiny. And until you bury it, every step forward will feel like resistance because you're trying to move while dragging dead weight. You don't need to fix the old you need to release it. Let go of trying to improve what was only ever meant to be temporary. Your next level isn't waiting on a better plan, it's waiting on a better you. One built on conviction, not convenience. On discipline, not emotion. On calling, not comparison. And that version only rises when the old one is finally laid to rest. Every elevation begins with separation. You cannot rise while remaining entangled in the systems, habits, and mindsets that kept you grounded. The process of becoming demands that you surrender who you've been to access who you are becoming. But most people are too emotionally attached to the identity they built in survival mode. That version of you was formed in response to pain, rejection, fear, and limitation. It was built to keep you safe, not to help you soar. And because it's familiar, it becomes addictive. You start to associate your personality with your patterns. You start believing that procrastination is just your nature, that overthinking is how you process, that playing small is just your way of being humble. But these aren't personality traits. They're defense mechanisms created by an identity that's expired. You can't build wealth, lead powerfully, or serve at scale while nurturing an identity that was never meant to carry those responsibilities. The old you reacts emotionally, seeks validation, overcommits, underdelivers, waits for motivation, fears rejection, doubts capacity, and shrinks when it's time to stretch. That version of you cannot come with you because the new you doesn't just need new habits, it needs a new spirit. A spirit that understands discipline is greater than desire, that results follow responsibility, that consistency outruns inspiration every single time. You don't become new by trying to act differently. You become new by deciding that the former version of you no longer has authority in your decisions. You have to silence the voice that tells you you're not qualified. You have to silence the loop that plays every failure like a soundtrack. You have to silence the inner critic that pretends to protect you but really just paralyzes you. Because that voice isn't truth, it's a recording from the past. And if you don't rewrite the script, it will narrate your entire future. The problem isn't whether the new you is possible. The problem is whether you're willing to bury the version of you that was trained by trauma, shaped by scarcity, and addicted to fear. Because as long as you tolerate it, you'll replicate it. You'll keep recreating circumstances that match your internal settings because the mind is programmed to prove itself right. If you believe you're not enough, your actions will align with that belief. If you believe you can't succeed, you'll self-sabotage before success arrives. If you believe growth is dangerous, you'll stay where it feels safe, even if it's slowly killing your potential. The death of the old you requires intention. You can't just wish it away. You have to audit your life. You have to look at every area, your environment, your calendar, your inner circle, your conversations, and ask, does this reflect who I'm becoming or who I used to be? You have to destroy the myth that you can change your life without changing your lifestyle. The old you built routines around coping. The new you must build routines around conquering. That means saying no when it's easier to say yes. That means waking up early when your body says stay in bed. That means creating content, building offers, making calls, writing plans, whether you feel like it or not. The new you doesn't serve feelings. The new you serves the future. And your future won't recognize you if you're still speaking the language of the past. You must make peace with letting go of everything that fed the old version of you. That includes old narratives, old relationships, old identities, even old wins. Sometimes the enemy of your next win is your last one. You get so caught up in who you used to be and what you used to achieve that you stop pursuing what's still possible. But the new you doesn't live in nostalgia. The new you is too focused on purpose to entertain the past. The new you knows that elevation is not an accident. It's a daily commitment to show up as someone your old self would have never recognized. Because true transformation isn't just about having more, it's about becoming more. And that level of becoming can only happen when you finally lay to rest the version of you that was only built to survive. The old you was built for survival, shaped by fear, and trained by limitation. But the new you was designed for dominion, influence, and impact. This transformation is not optional if you're serious about stepping into purpose, calling, and legacy. The version of you that hesitates, delays, second guesses, and plays small cannot coexist with the version that leads, builds, creates, and multiplies. You can't rise while carrying the weight of who you used to be. You must bury the excuses, starve the fear, break the patterns, and disrupt the identity that's kept you confined. This isn't about motivation. It's about a spiritual and mental decision to no longer negotiate with average. The future doesn't belong to the person who simply dreams. It belongs to the one bold enough to kill the old self, walk through discomfort, and become unrecognizable to everything and everyone that once felt familiar. Because until the old you dies, the new you will always be held hostage by a past that was never meant to define you.